It's one of those nights when the world feels a little too heavy. Sarah, a young girl barely in her teens, sits alone in her room, surrounded by the silence of an empty house. Her hands tremble as she picks up a pen, the only way she knows to connect with the mother she's lost. Every night, she writes letters to her late mom, pouring her heart out, hoping that somehow, somewhere, her words would find their way to her mother's spirit. But this time, it's different. This time, Sarah's letter is different. It's a desperate cry for help, a plea to take her away from the only family she has left, her Aunt Mary. Aunt Mary had taken Sarah in after the death of her mom, but things haven't been the same. The warmth of family was replaced with cold rules, sharp words, and a sense of loneliness that Sarah couldn't escape. The woman who should have been a guardian, a protector, felt more like a stranger, and Sarah's once joyful days had become long, drawn-out hours of isolation. Every day, she felt the walls around her growing higher, pressing in on her until there seemed to be no way out. The letters, though, were her secret, her safe place. She'd write to her mom about how badly she wanted to escape, about how her aunt's house was nothing more than a prison. She would ask her mom to take her away, to come back and save her from a life that felt so bleak and unforgiving. And yet, every morning when Sarah would rush to the mailbox, hoping for a sign, there was nothing. Just the cold reminder that her mother was gone, leaving Sarah to fend for herself. But then something extraordinary happened. One day, as Sarah ran out to check the mail, she saw something she wasn't expecting. Among the usual bills and junk mail, there was a letter addressed to her. No return address, no name, just her own, written in the familiar scrawl of someone who had once cared for her deeply. She tore it open, her heart racing, wondering who could have possibly sent it. And as she read the words, her eyes widened in disbelief. The letter was from her mother. Or at least it seemed that way. The letter spoke to her as though her mom had somehow heard her cries. "Don't worry, my dear. I'm with you," it read. "I'm watching over you. Everything will be okay." The message was short, but its weight felt like a mountain. The idea that her mother had somehow received her letters and sent one back was overwhelming, but something about it felt off. The letter didn't mention anything about the family Sarah had written about, nor did it explain how her mother could have sent it. It was as though the words had come from nowhere, from a place where only magic or something more could reach. Sarah's mind spun. Was it possible? Could her mom have somehow found a way to communicate with her, even from beyond? Or was there someone else behind this, pulling strings in a way Sarah couldn't understand? Her heart raced, both with hope and fear. Could this letter be the beginning of something extraordinary? Or was it just the product of her lonely, imaginative mind? As the days passed, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the letter than met the eye. She wrote another one, a follow-up, asking for more details. She was desperate for answers. She wanted to know if her mom could really come back, if she could really be saved from her aunt's house. But would the letter be answered? Would she receive another reply? The mystery only deepened when another letter arrived, but this time it wasn't addressed to Sarah. It was for Aunt Mary. When Sarah saw the envelope, her stomach dropped. Her aunt didn't know about the letters, and Sarah had promised herself she'd keep them a secret. She hesitated, torn between curiosity and fear. What could possibly be inside? Was this letter meant for her aunt, or was it somehow still a part of this strange chain of messages that had begun with her own plea for help? The letter for Aunt Mary wasn't like the others. There was no warmth, no comforting words, just cold, chilling instructions. It told her to stay away from the child. The letter warned her that she was being watched, and that her actions would have consequences. It felt like a threat, a warning that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. She knew her aunt had a temper, but this This was something else entirely. Now Sarah was caught in the middle of something much bigger than she could have ever imagined. The letters seemed to be speaking to her from a place beyond the grave, but they were also revealing secrets that threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew about her family. Her aunt was hiding something, Sarah could feel it. But what? And why was she being warned to stay away from her? With each letter, Sarah's world became more and more confusing. She didn't know who to trust anymore, or if these letters were even real. Was it really her mother sending them, or was someone else playing a dangerous game? And if her mom was truly watching over her, could she really do anything to help her? The questions piled up, but the answers remained elusive. As Sarah sat alone in her room, staring at the latest letter in her hands, she realized she couldn't ignore this mystery any longer. The letters had opened a door that she couldn't close. But as she prepared to send another letter, one that would reveal everything she knew, she heard a knock at the door. Was it Aunt Mary? Or someone else, someone who might know the truth? Sarah took a deep breath. The next chapter of her story was about to unfold, and she had no idea what was waiting on the other side. Sarah sat frozen on her bed, the knock at the door still echoing in her ears. Her heart raced, a cold sweat gathering at the back of her neck. Who could it be? Aunt Mary had never knocked like that before. The urgency, the loudness, sent an unsettling chill through her body. She had to act fast. The letter she'd just received, the one warning her aunt to stay away from her, still lay on the floor beside her, the words haunting her thoughts. The warnings, the threats, had all been directed at Aunt Mary. But why? What had she done to deserve such ominous words? What secret was her aunt hiding? Sarah had always sensed something was off with her aunt, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Aunt Mary had never been cruel, but she wasn't warm either. The way she kept to herself, her cold, practical way of running the house, it was all a bit too much for Sarah. But nothing had ever felt dangerous. That is, until now. She took a deep breath, hesitating before rising to open the door. Her hand trembled as it hovered over the doorknob, her mind running through every possible scenario. Was it Aunt Mary coming to confront her? Had she found out about the letters? Or was it someone else? Someone who knew more than she should? When Sarah finally opened the door, she wasn't prepared for what she saw. It wasn't Aunt Mary. Standing in the hallway was a stranger, a woman she didn't recognize. She was older, maybe in her late 30s, with dark, sharp features that seemed both familiar and strange. Her eyes were piercing, like she could see right through Sarah, into the very core of her. "I'm sorry to disturb you," the woman said, her voice calm, but with an edge. "I need to talk to you. It's important." Sarah felt a wave of unease wash over her. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced nervously down the hallway, as if making sure no one was watching. Her eyes flicked back to Sarah. "It's not safe here. We need to move quickly. Trust me." Sarah stood there, frozen in place. She didn't know what to do. She'd heard about strangers, people who came with false promises, dangerous lies. But something about the woman's demeanor made Sarah's gut twist with an uncomfortable knowing. This wasn't just some random person off the street. This woman seemed to know something. And maybe, just maybe, she knew something about her mom, the letters, and everything that had been happening in the past few days. Before Sarah could respond, the woman spoke again. "There's no time to explain it all. But your aunt, she's not who she says she is. She's involved in something dangerous. You're in more danger than you realize." The words hit Sarah like a slap in the face. Her aunt, dangerous. Sarah had always thought Aunt Mary was cold, maybe even a little distant, but she never imagined she could be dangerous. The very idea seemed impossible, yet the woman's certainty left no room for doubt. Something about Aunt Mary's past, something she'd been hiding, was far darker than Sarah could ever have imagined. "Your mother knew," the woman added, her voice lower now, almost as if she were sharing a secret. "She tried to protect you. That's why she sent the letters. She was trying to warn you about your aunt." Sarah's mind reeled. Her mother. The letters? She had to know more. "How do you know all of this? What do you want from me?" The woman looked around one last time before stepping closer to Sarah, her voice a whisper. "I can't tell you everything now, but I'm the only one who can help you. You need to come with me, or your aunt will destroy everything your mother tried to protect." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to believe this woman, wanted to trust that her mother was still out there, somehow trying to save her. But she also felt the weight of everything she'd been taught. Never trust strangers. Never go anywhere with someone you don't know. The world was full of lies and deceit, and Sarah wasn't sure who to trust anymore. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Aunt Mary was coming. Sarah's mind raced. What should she do? Should she let the woman in? Should she run away with her, try to escape the life that had been suffocating her? Or should she confront her aunt, demand answers, and hope that everything could be explained logically? Before she could make a decision, Aunt Mary appeared in the doorway. Her eyes narrowed when she saw the stranger standing there. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice sharp, her posture rigid. The tension in the room thickened. Sarah felt as if she were stuck between two worlds, one that promised safety and answers, and the other that had always been her reality. The woman looked at Aunt Mary with something like disdain. "I think you know who I am," she said, her voice barely audible. Aunt Mary's face tightened, and for a brief moment, Sarah thought she saw a flicker of something dark in her aunt's eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Get out," Aunt Mary said, her voice cold and commanding. "Now." The woman didn't flinch. Instead, she turned to Sarah and gave her a sad, knowing look. "I'm sorry, but I won't leave until I know you're safe." Aunt Mary stepped forward, locking the door. "You don't know anything," she snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. "This isn't your business." The stranger didn't back down. "You've been hiding the truth, Mary. And now it's time for Sarah to know everything." The letters, they weren't just from her mother. They were from someone much more powerful than you. At this, Sarah's heart stopped. What did that mean? Who was more powerful than her aunt? And how was her mother involved in all of this? The woman's words hung in the air, thick with mystery. Sarah could feel the weight of everything pressing down on her, and she realized that her world, the world she thought she understood, was about to unravel. There was no turning back now. The words "someone much more powerful than you" echoed in Sarah's mind like a constant drumbeat. Her gaze darted between her aunt, who now stood rigid and unblinking in the doorway, and the stranger, whose eyes burned with an intensity that felt almost familiar. Aunt Mary's cold, calculated expression cracked for just a moment. An emotion so raw and terrifying passed across her face that Sarah couldn't breathe. For a moment, Aunt Mary wasn't her aunt. She was someone else entirely, someone capable of terrible things. The woman stepped forward, slowly, as though she were preparing to reveal a truth that might shatter everything Sarah had ever known. "Sarah, I know this is hard to believe, but your mother wasn't just a woman. She was part of something much bigger. Something that's been protecting you even before you were born. And that's why they're after you." Sarah's mind spun. She wanted to understand. She wanted answers. She needed to know what had been happening, why these letters felt like a lifeline in a dark world, and why her aunt was so afraid of the truth coming to light. Protecting me from what? Sarah's voice trembled, but she stood tall, determined. The tension was thick. Her heart pounded against her chest as if it wanted to burst free, to escape the growing realization that her life had never been what it seemed. Aunt Mary finally spoke, her voice low, almost a growl. "You shouldn't have gotten involved in this, Sarah. You don't understand what's at stake." The woman met her gaze without fear. "That's because you've kept her in the dark for far too long. She deserves to know who she really is." Suddenly, Aunt Mary's facade of control cracked. She stepped forward, her face twisted with anger. "You think you can just waltz in here and tell me how to raise her? You have no idea what's really happening." Sarah felt like the floor was slipping out from under her. She looked between the two women, desperate for some kind of explanation. The silence stretched between them like a live wire ready to snap. The woman, the stranger, spoke with a quiet but firm voice. "Your mother was part of a secret organization, Sarah. They've been watching over you for years, keeping you safe from people who would use you for your abilities. And now they're closing in. They've already taken your mother from you once, but they'll stop at nothing to finish what they started." The words hit Sarah like a hammer. Abilities. A secret organization. The pieces clicked into place, slowly, painfully. She had always known something was different about her, that things didn't always add up. But hearing it all out loud, so starkly, was like peeling away the layers of a life she thought she knew. "No," Sarah whispered, her voice faltering. "I don't believe you. This isn't true." But deep down, she knew it was. The fear, the warnings in the letters, the strange way the woman spoke, it all pointed to the truth Sarah had been too scared to admit. Aunt Mary's face hardened again, her eyes filled with cold determination. "She doesn't need to know any of this. I've kept her safe all these years. It's for her own good." The woman shook her head, sadness in her eyes. "You've kept her in the shadows, Mary. You've been lying to her. And now it's time for the truth." Suddenly, there was a loud crash from outside the door. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The danger had come. Aunt Mary's face turned pale, and she quickly rushed to the door, locking it with trembling hands. But it was too late. The threat had found them. The woman grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her away from the door, urging her to run. "They're here. We don't have time for this. We need to go. Now." As they bolted through the back door, Sarah's heart was in her throat. Behind her, she heard Aunt Mary's voice, shaking with a blend of anger and desperation. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. They'll kill you if they find out who you really are." Sarah didn't stop. She couldn't. The world she thought she knew had shattered into pieces, and she had to make a choice. Would she continue to run, hiding from the truth her whole life, or would she step into the unknown and face what she had been running from all this time? In the distance, Sarah could see a car parked in the shadows, waiting for them. The woman pushed Sarah into the back seat, her eyes glinting with urgency. "You're going to be safe. I'll explain everything later. But for now, you need to trust me." As the car sped off, Sarah looked back one last time, her aunt's face frozen in a mask of anger and fear. She had been a prisoner in her own home, unaware of the danger lurking just beneath the surface. But now there was no turning back. The letters, her mother's warnings, the secrets they had all kept, it was all coming to light. The car sped down the dark road, and Sarah felt a rush of mixed emotions. Fear, confusion, but also a glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone anymore. Her mother had sent her a lifeline, a person who knew the truth. And though the road ahead was uncertain, Sarah had no choice but to follow it. As the car disappeared into the night, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever happened next, she was no longer the scared little girl writing letters to a mother she thought she'd lost. She was a part of something much bigger, something dangerous. But she was also a part of something that would fight for her, something her mother had fought for. And no matter what, Sarah was determined to find the answers that would lead her to the truth. The letters had been only the beginning. The rest of the story was yet to be written.